Jon Larsen was one of this congregation's delegates to the UU General Assembly this year. Prior to attending, Jon made an effort to understand the new Article 2 that was going to be voted on. During the assembly, he was also involved in online discussion groups, again, trying to gain a better understanding of the pros and cons of this change, which ultimately the assembly voted to approve. Today, Jon hopes to help us understand what this change is and what it means for our congregation. Thanks, Jon.
There we go. Well, welcome back, folks. It's great to see you all. And yeah, that pig is kind of amusing. We'll get into what that stands for in a little bit. But I wanted to talk to you today about the new Article 2. I'm not here before you in support or dissent of the article, but rather hope to provide one person's view of what it means. To better understand the Article 2 debate, I participated in chat groups and discussion boards at GA and did a lot of research on my own about the topic. After all the talk, this is my understanding of what it is. In 1985, the 7 principles and 6 sources were adopted by the UUA. At that time, the change was considered radical and met with much the same divisive feelings as Article 2 does today. People argued that UUism was turning creedal, taking away our right to free thought and search for personal truth. As a living tradition, the UU bylaws state that Article 2 should be reevaluated every 15 years. It's been 40 years since we've seen any revisions. And this year at GA 2024, a new revision of Article 2 had passed by a majority of 80%. Now, I know me and Sarah, everybody in this, we took a poll on it, and everybody here was against the new Article 2. Sarah and I did vote against it at the will of the congregation, just to let you know. Probably the most important word in the new Article 2 is to define is love. How do we define love in this context? I think it's best said by writer S.M. Hasnian, who says, love at its most fundamental essence of existence stands as a radiant force of transcending barriers and transforming lives. In its embrace lies the power to elevate souls, nurture compassion, and instill a sense of purpose beyond the material realm. Now, as I've laid out here, each word aligns with a corresponding word. The 7 principles have now been replaced with the 6 values in love. The 6 sources is now a statement on inspirations. Covenants and beliefs have not changed. They still exist in the new Article 2. So let me walk you through some of the definitions to help us understand the differences between the old and the new. I think it's important to understand the differences between principles and values. Under the old Article 2, we had principles. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines principles as a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation of a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning. Likewise, a value can be defined as something, such as a principle or quality, intrinsically valuable or desirable. Other words included sources, a first-hand document or primary reference of work or place, person, or thing from which something comes or can be obtained. One example comes right out of our Six sources, wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Inspirations is a divine influence or action on a person believed to qualify him or her to receive and communicate sacred revelations. Another way of looking at this is as the process of being mentally stimulated by something to do or feel something, especially to do something creative. For example, Article 2 inspiration state, we draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings that help us make meaning and live into our values. Now, covenant is a written agreement or promise, usually under seal between two or more parties, especially for the performance of some action. We'll talk more on this a little bit later. And beliefs is something that is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion, something believed. As I stated earlier, the seven principles we know and love were adopted in 1985. They were written in a top-down relationship. Principle 1, stating the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is first because it represents the micro, the individuals. And the relationship grows bigger from there, culminating in the worldview, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, which we are a part. By contrast, the new Article 2 is defined by values, justice, equity, interdependence, and generosity. JetPig, as the mnemonic goes, and is currently being used as a teaching aid because it's easy to remember surrounding love. Oh, those are the action words that go along with each of the different values. Each of the values is pushed through with words that are action oriented. We work. We work for justice. I can't see that one either. Oh, I can't see the red one. We declare for equity. We adapt in transformation. We celebrate for pluralism. Interdependence is we honor, and generosity we cultivate. Now I'd like to take you through the seven principles and see how they are reflected in the six values. Yeah, that red didn't turn out too good on that screen, huh? First principle is straightforward in its new iteration. Found under equity, it states that we declare every human has the right to flourish with dignity and worthiness. Now, the wording to this has changed slightly due to an amendment that passed a GA, but the core concept is still there. The big difference is, as I stated earlier, a call to action. We declare. The second principle, again, is straightforward, as justice and equity are part of the values. Justice calls us to work, to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. Equity continues with, we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. This seems to me to be written in the spirit of the principle and, once again, expresses a call to action. The third principle is roughly under pluralism with the statement, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experiences, and theology. Again, there it is using some updated language. For the fourth principle, we again turn to pluralism, which finishes with a covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Word for word, there it is. The fifth one is there too. Well, didn't go there. There we go. The fifth one is there too. The right to conscience and the use of the democratic process. It can be found under justice in stating, we support the use of the democratic process to make decisions in our congregations, association, and society at large. We support may seem a little vague, but I believe it puts the responsibility to define this on each individual and congregation. And principle 7 is easily found under interdependence. It states we honor the independent web of all existence. With reverence to the great web of life and humility, we acknowledge our place in it. Note, we honor, another call to action. But what about the sixth principle? Where'd I go? I suggest it's still expressed here. I lost my place. Sorry, folks. Interdependence goes on to say, we covenant to protect the earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality, I hate that word, and justice. I feel the sixth principle is here in an all-encompassing action. Notice how each opened with a call to action. In generosity, which is new and not tied to any principle, states, we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Hey, I got that word right this time. So what does this mean to us as a congregation? That's a good question, ripe with debate. Here is some of the debate as found in chat groups and websites related to 2024 Article 2. To many people, both in the ministry as well as congregations, they think the 6 values are problematic. Many believe they are obscure in meaning and filled with ambiguity. In one way, I could agree that the action statements are a little vague. How do we show support or adapt as the actions call us to do? For many, this is very straightforward and needs no definitions. I believe if you see ambiguity, it was written in there for a reason. I contend that it's there for us to interpret individually and as a congregation as to what it means for us and how to act upon them. The Article 2 Commission stated in defense of the last slide, we took great care in every word we selected to use. Some people believe that this has led to ambiguity in the value statements and inspirations. For example, in the interdependence value, it states, we will seek to repair harm and damage and damaged relationships. Well, to some that may seem vague, lacking a definition of harm and damage. What is meant by these words? Are we talking individuals as a community at large or society in general? I suggest it's all above, once again, open to interpretation. Remember our definition of covenant? A written agreement or promise usually under seal between 2 or more parties, especially for the performance of some action. Dr. The Reverend Dr. Sophia Bettencourt, president of the UUA, was once quoted as saying, "A covenant without consequences is not a covenant." I admit that seems a little scary to me. Does it mean that we as a congregation or individuals should be held accountable for our actions or inactions as it applies to the six values? Is the UUA going to police congregations, or do we hold ourselves accountable? What is accountability going to look like? Some suggest that this wording can be held against accreditation of a congregation should it not be able to prove they are acting in accordance with the values. Believe it or not, these are the questions brought up, some of the questions brought up in chat about what Dr. Bettencourt, about taking Dr. Bettencourt at her word. So the UUA says accountability is saying that we are congregations with integrity that hold ourselves to the commitments and values we express to the world, informed by relationships we build within our walls and beyond. Pretty simple and straightforward, I guess. Accountability begins in the congregation and extends to our actions beyond. Some contend that with the adoption of the new Article 2, the UUA is transforming the politics of our spiritual community. They believe that it is pushing us away from the individual growth and more towards community action. Many congregations are already on the social justice path, fighting for changes on a large scale, like prison reform, rights for marginalized communities, environmental justice, and racial equity, and always have been. If we're already doing the work, how can Article 2 transform our communities in that respect? I suggest that this work in the community begins at home. We must support the spiritual growth of our congregational community to inspire us to go out and continue the work. What about the individual freedoms of belief? It was clearly stated in the old Article 2 and remains much the same in the new revision. The old states, "Nothing in herein shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedoms of beliefs, which is inherent in the Universalist and Unitarian heritages, or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union used by any congregation unless such is used as a creedal test." Oh, it didn't move. I'm sorry. There we go.
The bill don't happen, so you chat.
Yeah, I thought I tapped it.
No, I mean, going forward, the bill won't happen. until you
Okay.
chat.
And the new says congregational freedom and the individual rights of conscience are central to our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of unions, so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed. Seems pretty much the same in my opinion. So ultimately, what does this mean to our congregation? According to the Reverend Sana Saeed, our congregational life consultant, congregational polity allows each congregation full autonomy to do what they would like with their bylaws and how they represent themselves. In other words, we are free to be ourselves without any effect or repercussions on our relationship with the UUA. One area that will change is in the religious education curriculum. In both adult and children RE, you can be sure that the six values and love at the center will be the norm as we move forward. In fact, some congregations have already started to address that in RE, hence JetPig. Not yet. And as it happened with the change to the principles, hymns will most likely be added. And as the UUA states, the UUA principles will no longer be incorporated in the UUA bylaws. We anticipate congregations and individuals will continue to utilize the UUA principles alongside the newly articulated shared UUA values. As previous covenants and statements of commonly held beliefs are used within their historical context today. Just because the principles of 1985 are no longer in the UUA bylaws doesn't mean they're forgotten. They will continue to exist in its historical context, always there and always available to individual congregations to use as they wish. In closing, I'd like to read the transformation value. It states, we adapt to a changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian Universalist heritages. Never complete, never perfect. So there you go. Times are a-changing. JetPig is probably going to be the new mascot for Article 2. And this is some of what I got out of GA and some of my research.